Hey guys, Jami here. I'm here today with Dan Hunt, who's a former Dragons player, and he's going to be talking a little bit about his story with mental health and an organization he has started called the Mental Health Movement. Welcome to the podcast, Dan. How are you?
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it, I guess, to be able to share that power of story, but also the lived experience around mental illness, but then I guess the tangible tools and awareness and education that can help people not just manage their mental health, but also manage and live a positive, productive life with the mental illness as well. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. And already you raised such a good point. And just to tell a little bit of our listeners how we met, you came to my work and did a workshop on mental health during Men's Mental Health Week. And the power of your story was so amazing. And I think you've captured that so well, because I went to the workshop with a couple male colleagues who otherwise probably wouldn't have gone to a workshop if you hadn't been, a former Dragons player. They love rugby, and just raising that awareness is so important. I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, no, it was a good workshop. I think we had nearly 40 or 50 people in the room that day before the social distancing and COVID shut down the planet. But look, for my story, I guess in a nutshell, because obviously we don't have all the time in the world, but I had a pretty rough or tough upbringing around domestic violence. And as a young person, I was taught to get on with it, get over it and harden up. And that's exactly what I did. I swept a lot of the things from my past under the carpet, pretended like they weren't there, and I guess put on the brave face, so to speak. For myself, though, I was lucky enough that I had support, in particular rugby league, that helped me through a really tough period growing up. It got me back on the straight and narrow, and I started to be around a lot more positive people, making positive decisions. And for myself, it was a bit of a guiding light for me. I was lucky enough. Three things that I kind of lacked growing up was a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, and a sense of belonging, which are three human needs that do need to be met. But rugby league was able to give me those. I worked really hard with that. Still very up and down, very withdrawn at times, very angry. And it was in 2007, I was lucky enough, the hard work did pay off. And I made my NRL debut with the Dragons, which was a dream come true. But I guess, like coming into work or going to work, there's other people. And for me, it was 30 men, testing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally every single day. And some days I'd come into training and train well, I'd play well, I'd be a bit of the joker, the life of the party. Other days I'd come in, I could hardly hold a conversation with someone. I'd be withdrawn, I'd be down. I used to have like 2, 3, 4 triple double shot coffees to try and pep my mood up, to be able to, I guess, get through the day. But I had no understanding of what was going on. I didn't know anything about mental health or mental illness back then. We weren't educated on that. And we don't know what we don't know. So for me, I just suffered in silence. There's no way I was talking about it or sharing stuff from my past and the traumas that affected me and how it affected me, and to put my hand up and say, look, I'm struggling, I'm not okay, I need help. I was never doing that in that environment, because, look, I was conditioned to get on with it, get over it and harden up. I didn't think a man put their hand up, and I didn't think a man was supposed to struggle mentally. So I just did suffer in silence. I put on that brave face or that mask, so to speak, and I tried to convince myself and the world that I was okay. For me, I did go through some periods. In 2010, I had a season-ending injury where I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and we went on to win the grand final that year, which was something that at the time I had a real chip on my shoulder about, a real victim mentality. It was poor me, why me, how's this happened to me? Because that was taken away. I wasn't a part of that, but I did have to get surgery as well on my ruptured Achilles tendon. But I guess the straw that broke the camel's back was that stuff from my past and my upbringing, that it come back and hit me like a ton of bricks. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And there's no way I was putting my hand up and asking for help for it, because I thought that was a sign of weakness. I didn't think that's what a man did.
Was there a particular trigger then? Was it the injury you think that triggered that, bringing up that stuff in the past, or?
Yeah, it was as I said, like a little bit earlier, footy was what kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. It got me out of, I guess, the environment growing up, and it gave me that sense of identity, purpose and belonging. So it was kind of the glue that held things together. But when that was taken away and going through all that, missing the grand final, I guess things started to unravel. Surgery, it was part of that. Changing, like obviously going through the physical aspect of it. But then it was, that stuff it was just an accumulation of those things from my past coming back and hitting me. And I didn't have the resilience or the understanding or the education that I've got now. So it was just a culmination of all those things coming together at the one time. And with the injury, you have to get surgery. With surgery, you take painkillers. But look, I began to take it not just to take away the physical pain. I began to take them to take away the emotional pain. Mixing it with illicit drugs, with alcohol, prescription medication. I was wanting to numb the pain that I was in, not just the physical pain, but the emotional and mental pain that I was in. Look, that's how I seen a lot of things from my past, how people dealt with things through self-medication. And for me, that become a substance use issue. And over an 8-month period, it put me in the worst place that I'd ever been in. And I had no idea how I was going to get out of it. And to be honest with you, I was shit scared. But look, when you're in that place, I had my blinkers on. I was only focused on the pain that I was in. I had no perspective. I had no understanding how much it was impacting myself, how much I'd changed, and how much it was impacting the people around me. I was pushing the closest people to me away, treating them like shit. And it was just a really, really tough period. I was very lucky, though, that I had the good people, good supports around me, even though I was treating them poorly and pushing them away. They which isn't an easy thing now looking back what they went through. But now having them there, I guess the stimulus or catalyst that people go through, you can't force someone to seek support or make a change. People need to go through their own stimulus, their own catalyst to be able to want to do that. And one of the biggest challenges in the mental health space, it's not so much that there's not enough support out there. It's about getting that individual to that support. And that was kind of it for me. It wasn't the injury. It wasn't the addiction or the substance use. It wasn't even the upbringing. It wasn't missing the grand final. It wasn't any of those things that got me to the point of wanting to seek that support and make those changes. It come down to 2 conversations. And that's why our slogan at the mental health movement is starting the conversation, because you don't necessarily know what someone is going through. They could be wearing that mask exactly the same way I was. And that conversation can sometimes change and save someone's life. And I had 2 conversations. One was with my mum and the other one was with Wayne Bennett. And those conversations changed my perception and how I looked at how I was traveling, how I was going, and how much struggle I was in, but then also the impacts that was having on people around me. And from those conversations, I realized that I was in a really bad place. I realized that it was okay to struggle as a man. That was probably one, knowing that you got the people around you and that you're not alone, but knowing it was okay to struggle, but it was also okay to seek support. It didn't mean you were weak. It didn't mean you weren't a man. All it meant was you wanted to be doing better than what you were. So that's what I had to do. It was going to be more than just, I guess, a conversation with Mum and Wayne Bennett. It was, I needed some professional help. And then that's where I went up Black Dog Institute in Randwick.
Oh, Black Dog. That's great. So in those conversations, did you have that realization that asking for help isn't necessarily weakness? Or
the first one with my mum, it was more she kind of gave me some home truths where you talk about a stimulus or a catalyst. She actually said to me that, look, you're becoming your father, and he was someone that I was not to be like. And you talk about a stimulus or a catalyst, that kind of changed my perception almost instantly, and I started to look at where I was at and what was happening very quickly. And the second one with Wayne was probably the one that answers your question, where he just checked in on me and asked how I was traveling. He noticed some changes in me. And then after I broke down and I just opened up and shared stuff, the traumas and things from my past that I'd never shared with anyone. And from that, he didn't say, give me a secret answer or try and solve it all for me. He just said, look, it sounds like you're doing it really tough. And there's a lot of things happening, but it's okay to be going through a tough time. Let's get into the support that you need. And to hear those words in particular coming from him, but not everyone's going to have a Wayne Bennett in their lives, but everyone can be the Wayne Bennett and start that conversation and provide support. So from there, going to the Black Dog Institute and getting diagnosed with a mental illness, it was confronting, but it was also at the same time, other than meeting my wife and having my kids, it was the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it didn't give me a label. I'm not big on labels, but what it did give me, it was some context and some understanding about how I was feeling, my moods, my personality, all these different things. It really did give me an understanding in the diagnosis that I got, which was of type 2 bipolar. And from that, I looked at it very similar to the way that I looked at all the injuries and the surgeries that I've had, which is you learn to manage it. I no longer suffer with a mental illness. I'm not type 2 bipolar. I just manage type 2 bipolar. And language is powerful for us as human beings in the way in which we interpret and perceive things. So although I have a mental illness, I'm mentally healthy. And that is something that is achievable. But look, the journey started for me when I was diagnosed. And then I learned the coping strategies, the mindset, the support networks, the clinical support, the protective factors, all these different elements and aspects that you have to put in place for yourself. And I also learned that there's no finish line to this. It's like my psychologist said this to me. She's like, why are you always rushing to have your shit together or have it all worked out and have everything perfect? Where she said, there's no finish line. We put all this pressure on ourselves. There's no finish line. It's just taking it that day at a time or that hour at a time, and trying to, I guess, have a plan, have a structure, have a routine, but not putting all that expectation on ourselves that we do. And that was probably something that really rung true with me. And obviously with bipolar, the moods and things like that, when you do start to I guess it's about slowing down, putting yourself in the present, and things like that. But do you want me to keep telling my story or?
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Continue.
So from that, look, the diagnosis, obviously I had those issues around the drugs and alcohol. So I did have to do a drug rehabilitation program and spend some time to be able to work through that, which was, it was challenging. But what that, I guess, gave me was an understanding, things I needed to stop doing, start doing, and some changes I needed to make about myself. And they're things that, I guess, throughout that time as well, like I've I guess what the word is, fallen off the wagon or struggled as well after that. But being now able to have the awareness and the understanding and the tools and the support, it's made the world of difference. Moving forward with that, I did get back to playing football, which it took me about 12 months to get back on a footy field, both mentally and physically healthy.
Okay.
And look, I ended up playing 150 games with the Dragons across a 9-year period. Played Australian Prime Ministers, City Country, got to play with some great players, play against some great players, something I'm very grateful for. But during that time as well, I did go and studied a fair bit at TAFE and at university to put the lived experience with the qualifications to be able to, I always wanted to start something and do something using the power of story, but then also having the best practice, research-backed, clinically validated elements to be able to really, I guess, provide people the tools to be able to better manage themselves and their mental health, but also to be able to better support someone as well. So I did study a range of things at TAFE and then social work, which, the education has been the key to it all, because we don't know what we don't know. And for me, the more I knew, the more I could, I guess, make better decisions for myself, put better things in place for myself. And when you start doing better things, you start feeling better, and good things start happening. So from there, look, in 2015, unfortunately, I got pushed into retirement. I had a career-ending knee injury where I had to get a high tibial osteotomy and my leg broken, bone taken out, put back together, plates and screws. That was my 10th surgery. I've actually had surgery in COVID where I ruptured my pec about 4 months ago. So, so definitely had plenty of surgery. So I understand the pain aspect of things. But being forced into retirement, it wasn't easy. That identity and purpose was taken away. And as you heard earlier in my story, that identity, purpose, and things like that were elements that kept me on the straight and narrow. So I was worried, was I going back to that place in 2010 with the retirement? But I was lucky that I had the support networks around me. I knew that it was okay to struggle. I knew it was okay. You didn't have to have your shit together all the time. But I also knew how to better manage myself. So I didn't turn to drugs and alcohol this time. I put the right protective factors in place, and I was able to transition through retirement, which for a lot of players is not easy. And a lot of players do struggle with it. From that, I was able to, I did go back and work in rugby league in welfare and education, which was my dream job when I first finished. But I'd started the mental health movement as an Instagram page, just sharing parts of my own story. And then sort of in 2016, I registered as a business, as a company. And then we got some research done. We got the right clinicians in, and we developed our mental health workplace blueprint, which is 4 stages: awareness, education, training, and resources. And we've now delivered that and implemented that into nearly 72 different companies.
Wow.
And with over 300,000 Australian employees. We've got a team of 13 now. And the kind of rest is history. We're absolutely loving what we're doing. But in terms of that identity and purpose being taken away when I first retired, there can sometimes be that void left. And with that void, for a lot of individuals, can come struggle. And for me, I was lucky enough to be able to fill that void with very similar things to what rugby league gave me, which was structure, routine, having teammates around you, doing things to get yourself outside your comfort zone, doing things that challenge you, but also providing service to others, which is something I've found more identity, purpose, and belonging in what I'm doing now at Mental Health Movement than I ever did when I was playing for rugby league. It was kind of, I look at that now as that was just the vehicle to get me to where I am today. And I'm lucky enough, I've got some fantastic team members. I've got 2 ex-NRL players as well in Ashton Sims and Chris Houston, but I've also got an ex-pro surfer, Brett Kennellan, who is something that he got attacked by a great white shark and almost lost his life. And that was something that I guess changed him physically, but it also changed him mentally. And he's now on a different journey, and he's with us with the mental health movement and doing some fantastic things in the space. And then obviously the other people around it. But I guess the things that have really helped for me is definitely changing my mindset. And as much as I don't 100% do it all the time, but being grateful for what I do have and what I am doing, as opposed to always focusing on what you don't have or what you're not doing or what's next. Not for everyone, but for me, comparison's the thief of joy. I don't like comparing myself to other people. You stay in your own lane and focus on looking after yourself, but trying to be a better version of yourself so that then you are better at work, you are better for your loved ones, you are better for your family, and you're better for yourself. And then probably being proactive, not waiting till you're in the red, not waiting till shit hits the fan. Yeah. Having that self and that check-in, so you know when you are kind of sliding down, how you're traveling. For the people that are listening or watching, this is our mental health continuum. It's just one of the tangible tools that we educate on around checking in with your own mental health and understanding where you are on the continuum. So you got some insight in what you need to put in place for yourself. So that's probably some things. And then also the support, knowing that you've got people around you, don't judge you. They don't treat you differently. They're there to support you. They care about you, and actually using them, because some people have got a really good support network, but they don't use them because of the stigma, the stereotype, and judgment. So my poor support network getting absolute hammering, but it's something that's helped me.
That's amazing. I want to just circle back real quick to what you said about using the language around chronic illness, because one of the things we try to do at Chronic Hope is say someone's living with a chronic condition, someone's not struggling with a chronic condition, because it changes that language around, I'm not struggling, I'm living, and I'm living a full life. Just because I have a chronic illness or mental health condition doesn't mean that I'm less than someone who doesn't have one of those things. So I totally agree 100%. Around the language. Yeah. And then in terms of like work and all of that, because obviously this is your space, what was it like for you I mean, obviously it's a very different thing playing rugby and being a professional sports player, but what was it like for you telling your workplace about what you were going through, and maybe what's some advice that you would give someone with a chronic illness or a mental health condition who's sort of in that stage where they kind of need that help, but it's scary. They were worried about losing their job, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, look, it's a really, really good question, and there's probably not really any one straight answer to it. So I'll try and answer it as clearly as possible. But for me, the first part of your question is, look, for me, we had a very close-knit team at the time. I was like, Wayne Bennett was there, and we were very close. So for me, after I was diagnosed, I actually stood up in front of my team. Like, obviously, it's not like a workplace of 3,000 people. I was 20. Well, with the full squad, there's 30, but I was probably 20 that I stood up in front of, and I shared my upbringing, I shared my struggles, I shared my diagnosis, and I just said to them, look, I really need you to support me in terms of holding me accountable on things. But you guys, I spend probably more time with you all than anyone. So you're a big part of my support network. And look, that's probably where the penny dropped for me, that I knew there was something in the power of story, because even some of the players afterwards, they'd come to me and share their struggles or open up to me because they know I'd been through it. And that's where that penny dropped around vulnerability, in particular for men, that it's not that you've got to go and post it all over social media or tell the world, but you've got to have people in your life that you can take the mask off in front of and that you can be your authentic self to, because then you don't feel like you're constantly carrying around this burden of struggle. You can just be yourself, and so you can breathe again. So having the right people in your support network, I think, is really, really important. There's a lot of people out there that have got the wrong people in their support network, people that are judgmental, people that will throw it back in your face, people that will tell you to get over it and harden up, people that will tell you, well, you've got nothing to whinge about. You've got a good job. You've got a nice house, a nice car. What have you got to be struggling about? Like that struggles don't make people exempt because you've got a nice house and a nice car.
Yeah.
Like such an ignorant comment, but having the wrong people in your support network, you want people there that are sliding you back up here, not opening up to them and they're actually sliding you down the continuum. So I think that's really important in a workplace. Look, in today's day and age, I can't obviously talk for every company, but the companies that we've worked with, we've had people that have been going through a range of issues, from mental health issues, mental illness, from substance use issues, from addiction, gambling. And the companies that we have worked with, we've encouraged the individuals that were struggling to, I guess, because obviously best practice is you've got to get those people to support through either their employee assistance program or other clinical support. And the companies have been very, very supportive with that. Which I'm not going to say is surprising, but it's something that shows me that we've come a long, long way from even when I was diagnosed in 2010, which it's nearly 11 years ago now. We have come a very long way.
Yeah.
Workplaces are proactive they're starting to become proactive. Others are more proactive than some, but I think that if you are someone that's in a workplace and you are struggling, it's not that you've got to go and tell the whole workplace, but if you are going through a tough time, I really urge you to start making some changes, start that conversation with the right people, and get into that support. Just build your support network, get some coping strategies and self-care in place, because you don't have to do any of it on your own. I thought that being resilient was not struggling, which being resilient is about struggling. And it's about learning and adapting and growing and bouncing back. But you can't become resilient without struggle. That's part of the human experience is struggle. Unfortunately, it is struggle.
It's true.
But if you speak to a lot of people and you connect with them in a conversation like this, you will understand that how people are shaped and how they're formed themselves is through the struggles and the triumphs, but through the life experience they've been through. And some of those life experiences are struggle, which I've found that some of the most resilient people have some of the most amazing stories.
It's true. Yeah. And so in terms of, I guess you're talking a lot about your support network, and I love that. I totally agree. I didn't have that when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, which I think contributed to it. how do you go about, I guess, getting those people, the right people in, knowing who the right people are? What does that look like to kind of build that network?
Sometimes it's a bit of trial and error, definitely.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also the tough conversations. For me, it was more communicating with the people around you that you valued and you wanted in your support network, letting them know kind of what you needed from them as well. But it's also about communicating with them. It is to and fro. And having people in your support network is fantastic, but it's also providing those people support as well when they need it. So it is a bit of a two-way street. But for me, finding the right support networks, I had a look at some of the key elements that make up a good support network, which is people that it's not all about them. They're supporting you because they want to support you. So you know how you get the people where you start a conversation, you start telling them, look, I'm battling here, I'm doing this. It's like, oh, that's all right, just go do this, this, and this. Or, oh, you got nothing to worry about. There's starving kids in Africa. Like, yeah, there is starving kids in Africa, but I don't want you dismissing my struggles of what I'm talking about. Like, it may not be a struggle to you, but it is to me. So getting people in there that are not judgmental, that don't dismiss your struggles, someone that listens instead of tries to talk over you all the time, and someone that's got your best interest at heart. So if they see you doing something that's not good for you, they'll call you on it and they'll hold you accountable and say, well, that's not you. You shouldn't be doing that. Like, and having those people, I think, has made a massive difference. My wife's one of them. Sometimes we butt heads, but she's my biggest support network. It keeps me on the straight and narrow. As much as I don't like it sometimes, it's so important in having those right people. We've got some resources as well that I'll send through to you, where there is one profile of a good support network, and you can share with your listeners and things like that as well, which just makes it very clear, simple, and effective how to find that right person.
Yeah. And another question in terms of, I guess you talk about your journey, especially as a man, vulnerability can be very challenging. Why do you think there's so much stigma around men with mental or physical health issues? And what can we do to start to kind of break that and give men the freedom to talk more about it?
Why there is so much stigma relating to both mental and physical illness and issues or disorders, I think it comes a lot to conditioning. We haven't ever availability or access to so much good information, obviously with the digital world that we're now in. So the way in which we were conditioned in the past was if you had a struggle or you had an issue, grab a tissue. It was just, we don't want to hear about it. I remember when I first started at Woolworths, and I was working in the fruit and veg department. My boss, I was struggling. I was 15 or something, 16, and they said, don't bring your problems into work. I'm like, well, I spend 40 hours here. Where else am I supposed to take them? So from a young age, you're kind of taught to deal with it, to suck it up, princess. So if you do have a struggle, people just keep it to themselves. Where we know now that with the information, the education, the learnings, the best practice, and from people with the lived experience, there's a process. Just because you want to seek support or show some vulnerability or put some things in place, it does not mean you're weak. It means you're smart. It means that you want to be doing better than what you are. You want to learn to manage, not struggle or suffer. And if that means seeking support through your family member, friend, or someone like that, or changing your diet, or changing your workplace, or if it means going to find a psychologist or a counselor or a psychiatrist, if it means having to be prescribed the right medication with the right diagnosis, or if it's everything involved, it's not a weakness. You just want to be doing better than what you are. And we're not always going to be the best versions of ourselves every day, but at least if we're just moving forward in the right direction, trying to be, I think that there's enough identity and purpose in that to be able to do that. But I think the answer to your question in terms of how do we change it, it was awareness, which we're always going to need to have awareness, but I think we need to take the next step, which is education. And then from the education and the training and the resources, as you're doing with Chronic Hope, it's then about the application of that, because you can provide someone everything. But if you don't actually get in the seat of the car and start the ignition and put your foot on the accelerator, it's not, you can, it's exactly that. I think the next stage is education, and then we're going to transition into application. The application of the awareness, the education, the training, and the resources to be able to help ourselves and help each other.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point in terms of the idea of it's actually you're smart asking for help. And I'd never thought of it that way, but it's actually true. When you're getting yourself out of a bad situation or asking for help, it's actually not because you're weak, it's because you're smart and doing the right thing. And even if we could just switch the mindset around that could be a big thing. And then again, you're right, there's a lot of awareness around especially mental health issues, not as much chronic illness and invisible illness. But what's the next step? The next step is getting access to those resources, using them, having the courage to step out. And I love that because it's kind of what both of our organizations are trying to do is offer those resources.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, and we do educate on it, but out of all the data and research that we're done at the mental health movement, physical illness poor physical health was the 6th biggest contributing factor towards the poor mental health of an Australian employee, and illness and pain were in that. And I live with chronic pain every day. I've got absolutely zero cartilage in my left knee. I've got a bulging disc, L5S1, pushing on a sciatica nerve in my back. I just ruptured, my body's cactus. And I understand what it's like living and managing chronic pain every day. And for me as well, I battled with painkillers because you're between a rock and a hard place. You need the painkillers to get through the day, but then you justify it to yourself. You might have 1 or 2 more or that more, or I'll have it this day as well. And then next minute over a month, I was addicted, and it's still something that I manage. You still have those thoughts because you're in pain every day. So it is a constant management, and it is a bit of to and fro, but in saying that, I don't want to dismiss what you said there around chronic pain and illness. It is one of the biggest contributing factors that affects people's mental health. And chronic pain changes the way you think. It changes the way you perceive things. And when you change those things, you're going to change the way you interact with the world. And they're the facts.
Yeah, and honestly, I wonder because you talked a little bit about childhood trauma, and what I've noticed, I obviously haven't done research, is that childhood trauma is very highly correlated with mental and physical health issues. Because I had childhood trauma as well, and down the line am still struggling with that. So there's and it's such a complex sort of thing, like chronic conditions, etc. But the more we can get those different pieces, the better. And
I'll give you one of the things that we educate on. So there's a common question that gets asked a lot. Why do some people experience good mental health? Why do other people experience poor mental health? And then some people experience mental illness. Why is that? Yeah. So there's a lot of people's opinions and things around what that is. It's they're weak, or they're not resilient, or they don't know how to handle life, or whatever it is. But the clinical or the best practice way to answer that question is there is no one set answer, but there's a model called the biopsychosocial model. So what that is, it's 3 components. One component is the biology. So individuals can be born with a predisposed mental illness gene, a physical illness gene, that can put them at high risk of going through a mental health struggle or being diagnosed with a mental illness. It doesn't necessarily mean if your mother or father has depression that you're going to have depression, but it does mean that you're at high risk. Some individuals are born with a learning difficulty, with a physical disability, and those things. So they're the genetics and the biology factors around that question. The next aspect of it is the psychology. So the way in which an individual thinks. Your perception is different to mine. Your opinion is different to mine. Doesn't mean one's right or wrong. A pessimist and an optimist, they're going to get different outcomes on things. They're going to see things differently. But the way in which we think impacts the risk or answering that question in why do some people experience good mental health, poor mental health, and other people mental illness. The last aspect is the social or the environment. So that's anything and everything within our environment. Anything that we go through, as you said, from past experiences, early life trauma, grief, loss. It could be our jobs, work, finances, relationship, kids, all these contributing factors that we go through that affect our mental health. So as you can see, they can also correlate or permeate where there's that comorbidity, where for me, for example, we did have a predisposed mental illness gene in our family.
Okay.
I did go through domestic violence, drug abuse, trauma, things growing up. I played in a high pressure environment, and I did go through that physical illness, injury, and I had struggles with drugs and alcohol, which, as you can see, all of those aspects were covered to why I went through a mental health struggle and was diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, a lot of those things we can't manage or have control over in terms of our biology and our genetics, but a lot of the things within our environment and the way in which we think, they can be managed. I'm not saying controlled, but they can be better managed.
Yeah.
And that's where you start to put those coping strategies, protective factors and elements in place to be able to manage that. Does that kind of make a bit of sense where there's no one set reason why individuals
I think as well, it's such a good point because those factors, like you said, are out of your control, whereas a lot of people with mental health issues think it's their fault or are told it's their fault, that they've done X amount of things wrong. But when you take that out of it, it's like, oh, I have a condition that needs treatment and I have this condition because of factors that I can't control. And there's more grace for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And even like, because I didn't know that. And that's why I love having these chats on the podcast, because I learn things. And it also kind of takes it's empowering, because I guess for me, because it's like going from the victim where I have no control. You do, because you can look at those factors and then do things to mitigate the symptoms of growing up.
But the other thing around mental illness, for example, like when someone is experiencing clinical depression, like literally it changes the neurochemistry in your brain. So being able to tell someone that is living or managing chronic depression to snap out of it or to get over it or to just change your mindset, like you can't. The debilitating of chronic severe depression is as debilitating in the mental health first aid course. It talks about it. It's as debilitating as paraplegia. That's the debilitating nature of it. But because we can't see it, what we don't see, a lot of us, we don't understand. And for a lot of us, what we don't understand, we fear. But I don't think a lot of people in society don't understand the debilitating nature of mental illness when they are in the ill end of that continuum, and when they are struggling. Like I did a lot of my placement in a mental health hospital, in a rehab facility, and seeing the chronic end of individuals struggling with bipolar disorder, with mood, with PTSD, with anxiety, with depression, with schizophrenia, with psychosis. These things, there is so much misunderstanding around it and lack of awareness and education that society puts on individuals managing, going through that. I think that can be done a whole lot better. Bit of a rabbit hole there, but that was good.
I'm actually wondering, we don't have heaps more time, but I'm wondering if you could quickly go through the continuum that's behind you, just for those that want to watch on YouTube.
Yeah, easy. So, this is a continuum. Why we developed it was you can't see mental health. And for a lot of us, what we don't see, we don't understand. As I said, if you want to check in on your physical health, you can get on a set of scales, you can get an MRI, you can get an X-ray, blood pressure, all those different things. But our mental health, how do we check in on ourselves? So we developed something that's tangible, that you can see it. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's the different colors: green, yellow, orange, red. And on top, you've got the indicators. On the bottom, you've got the actions. And it's got healthy at this end, sliding at this end, struggling, and ill. And the thing about it is, we all move up and down this every day. Reasons being, well, they're the contributing factors. The change, challenge, and adversity, the shit we go through in life that affects our mental health. So the things that slide us down could be relationships, it could be work, stress, finances, COVID, illness, pain. But then we need to look at, check in on yourselves. Where are you on this continuum? And depending on where you are, will give you some really good insight in what you need to put in place to help yourself bounce back up here. And for a lot of people in Australia, 54% of people that do slide down here, they don't seek support. They do exactly as I did and suffer. So the key is, if we can identify when we slide down here and have that self-awareness and then proactively put some things in place, we might only go from here to here. But if you do those things, little steps each day, have the supports, the coping strategies, that it might be medication, might be structured routine, self-care, we can slide ourselves back up here. And that's kind of what we do. It's about then asking yourself, where are you on the continuum today? And depending on where you are, what are you putting in place for yourself to help manage yourself where you are and get yourself back up that continuum? And the thing about it is, look, I still have days where I wake up here and I identify that, self-aware, and I realise there's some days where I just have to disengage and I put some self-care in place. I talk to my support networks and I might spend a week floating from here to here. But then I proactively put those things in place instead of self-sabotage, instead of self-medication, which would slide me further down here.
Yeah.
It's about proactively putting the things in place that will help you slide back up here. And that's kind of how you use it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, mental illness does not discriminate. It can affect anyone at any time. A nice house, a good car, a good job, and got plenty of money does not mean you're exempt from going through a mental health struggle or a mental illness, which I think is really important to understand.
Yeah, and for those listening, we will put that, we'll link that mental health continuum on the show notes so everyone can have a look at it and also can watch it on the YouTube channel. Thanks for going through that. And look, I think we're out of time, but thanks so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey. There's so much gold there. And thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story with what you're doing with the mental health movement. I think it's really helping people and unlocking that courage to be able to start talking about that stuff.
No, thank you. Can I just give a little plug to our mental health community blueprint? So we've developed, with the success of our workplace blueprint, a community blueprint. So we've got some merchandise on our website. If you want to go to www.mhmthestore.com.au, you can purchase budgie smugglers, smuglets for the ladies, keep cups, just merchandise, and all profits go towards the delivery of free mental health awareness training and resources to sporting and community organisations. If you wanted to support a good cause and also get a pair of smugglers for the upcoming summer, I'll get the dad bod out like me. But I'll just give that a plug. We've had 5 suicides in nearly 6 weeks down here in our local community. So it was something that we needed to address. So I just thought I'd give that a plug anyway. Yeah,
of course. We'll put that in the show notes as well, so those listening can go to the show notes and go buy some budgie smugglers.
Yeah, I'll also send you our support network toolbox in our profile of a good support that you can add into the notes to provide your listeners.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again.